So welcome back, everybody. Thank you again to those who've been with us for most of the afternoon. My name is Carolyn Deer-Burbeck, and I work for the Forum on Trade Environment at SDGs. I'm really delighted to be co-hosting this event with colleagues from the Graduate Institute and the Geneva Environment Network this afternoon. We're now at our third session of our hybrid event this afternoon, where we're coming back to discuss the question of vision and goals that should drive the talks on the Plastic Pollution Treaty. Focusing on the outcomes and the system change needed and how the treaty should be structured to achieve them. So to moderate this panel, I'm really delighted to introduce Felix Wertli, who is the head of Global Affairs section of the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. Felix has been very involved in the recent UNEA discussions around plastic pollution and also chemicals and waste. I'm really delighted to have you here to share the panel this afternoon.
Thank you much, Caroline, and thank you for the opportunity to share this third round for us moderator. We have heard we had a successful, ambitious outcome at UNEA 5.2. That is the starting point for this new process. I think for us as a government representative, it's also clear that it's not just a joy about the success, it's also an obligation that we're now able to deliver on this result. And as some have said, that was the easy part, what we have done so far. The real hard work starts now to define this treaty. We have heard this afternoon, we have to discuss and look how we can reduce the use of plastics, reduce the use of raw materials, how we can reuse existing products, how we can recycle, and also tackle the waste question. At this third part of the panel, we look a bit on the questions on how will a system look like that allows us to end plastic pollution, or to achieve this target. What are the key goals, targets, and outcomes that we have to achieve? And what are the key approaches, the key tools that we need to achieve these goals? So what are those key elements of the treaty? We have a great number of panelists and there were a lot of expertise. They will bring in different kinds of perspectives, political perspectives, from NGO side perspectives, real life experience working with waste, and also a lot of knowledge about sustainable consumption and production. And I'm happy to introduce the first panelist. It is Ambassador Gustavo Meza-Cuadra Velasquez. He's the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru, and he has a 30 years career as a diplomat, has a long experience in multilateral affairs, and also recently he has been announced as a candidate of Peru for the Bureau of the Ink process and to chair the process. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Forum on Trade and Environment and the SDGs, Global Governance Center, and the Geneva Environment Network for organizing this very important event. I would like to reaffirm through my participation in this event the commitment of the Republic of Peru to promote awareness on plastic pollution as a global environmental concern. The government of Peru is well aware of the devastating effects of plastic pollution on the loss of biodiversity, ecosystem services, and the worsening of the climate crisis. In this sense, Peru has taken several measures to address this problem, including resolutions related to comprehensive solid waste management and single-use plastics and disposable containers, as well as roadmaps for the integral management of plastics in the industry and artisanal fishing management of plastics in artisanal fishing sectors. Peru also promotes this subject in several regional forums. Like many environmental problems, plastic pollution is a transboundary problem that cannot be tackled by individual actions alone. In that spirit, in October 2021, in the context of the 8th annual meeting of the Subcommittee of Permanent Representatives to the United Nations Environmental Program, Peru and Rwanda presented a draft resolution aimed to end plastic pollution by starting the negotiations of a globally legally binding instrument to address this serious issue. The draft resolution was supported by more than 60 countries from different regions across the world and adopted during the last resumed session of the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. In Peru's vision, the future of international legally binding instruments should be as ambitious as possible. This new instrument should be based on a comprehensive approach to prevent and reduce plastic pollution in the environment by promoting a circular economy and addressing the full life cycle of plastics from production, consumption, and design to environmentally sound waste management, prevention, and treatment. It is also important to ensure a system that involves a responsible and sustainable production of plastics, as well as one that raises awareness among the general public on responsible consumption, keeping in mind the environmental, social, and economic impacts of its use. Plastic pollution disproportionately impacts developing countries and socio-economically challenged communities that work in informal and cooperative settings. That's why we need a strong treaty with ambitious objectives, but equally ambitious means of implementation that considers the needs of developing countries. Peru also believes that the international community should listen to different perspectives in order to achieve a truly ambitious treaty. All relevant stakeholders should be heard and need to join forces to find concrete measures to reduce the production of virgin plastic, encourage recycling, and ensure safe and proper waste disposal of existing plastics, especially in the marine environment. Shared objective of the future instrument, as well as the development of national action plans, should be heavily informed by science. It is crucial that science and its new developments support us and guide us in this process. The new treaty should have a human rights approach in order to truly achieve its goals. We need to understand that plastic pollution has a considerable impact on a broad range of human rights, including the rights to life, health, science, housing, and healthy environment. In that sense, it is also important to have a negotiation process that is open, inclusive, and transparent, which allows the participation of civil society, the private sector, academia, government, consumers, and the scientific community. For these reasons, I am honored and humbled that the government of Peru has decided to present my candidacy to become a member and chair of the Bureau of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, INC. I would like to thank the organizers again for promoting this event. I am confident that this very important dialogue will provide a great opportunity to raise awareness on the future negotiations of the INC and the expected outcomes of its work. I believe that all countries should work collectively to achieve an ambitious result for the sake of present and future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this intervention, and also thank you for reminding us of the leadership role Peru has taken with others in this very important process, but also to outline what does it mean an ambitious outcome, including to highlight the importance of science, linkage to human rights, but also the importance of resources to implement such a treaty, and that you've also mentioned at the beginning, the importance to be ready to work on a national level, to put in legislation and necessary measures. We would go to the next speaker on our list. This is Winnie. She is a senior manager with the Peru Charitable Trust, and she's working on Ocean Plastic Project, which aims to propose strategies to reduce the global ocean plastic pollution problem. She has worked on international conservation, developing new projects and partnership in Asia. So for sure, she's also be able to provide us further insights from the ground, concrete experiences that she had made in this work.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to speak and present on the vision and goals for the Global Plastics Treaty discussions. As you've heard throughout today, the ocean is vital to our planet's health and to our well-being and prosperity. However, ocean health is being threatened by a projected tripling of the amount of plastic waste entering the ocean by 2040. But not all is lost. In Breaking the Plastic Wave report that Pew and partners published in 2020, we found that there is a pathway to solving the plastic pollution problem. It will require governments, businesses, civil society, and citizens alike to collectively work toward a system change. The system change approach involves implementing solutions throughout the full life cycle of plastic, ambitiously and synergistically, and with haste. In a joint statement, Pew, along with a group of 16 leading organizations representing businesses, NGOs, and civil society, highlighted the need for urgent global action to halt and reverse the rapid increase in plastic pollution and create a circular economy for plastics. Based on the findings from Breaking the Plastic Wave, 6 key actions were outlined that provides a roadmap to help reduce plastic pollution flows to the environment to near zero by 2040. The first area is reducing plastic production and consumption, particularly focusing on eliminating all avoidable plastic use and establishing reuse and refill systems as a priority, and substituting plastic products with other materials where relevant and beneficial. The second area is designing all products and packaging, whether made of plastic or substitute material, to be reused, recycled, or composted in environmentally friendly, benign systems. These systems should be practical to implement at scale and focus especially on finding alternatives or solutions for multi-material or small format flexible plastic items that disproportionately leak to the environment and are not recyclable economically. A third area is improving and creating new waste management services with a focus on increasing collection, reuse, and recycling rates, providing long-term funding, developing circular systems, securing livelihoods, fair payment, and safe working conditions for formal and informal waste collectors, and filling key capacity gaps in middle and low-income countries. The fourth area is restricting and regulating transboundary movements of plastic waste, with export to countries with a proven capacity to manage and recycle both imported and domestically generated waste in accordance with globally accepted environmental, health, and safety standards. The fifth area is tackling microplastic pollution by using alternative materials and developing improved standards and capture technologies to reduce microplastic release from tires and textiles, setting mandatory supply chain standards to prevent pellet loss, and eliminating microplastic ingredients in plastic products, that might be released into the environment. And the sixth area is eliminating maritime sources and other sector-specific sources of plastic pollution, such as agriculture and construction, through policy interventions and incentives that minimize waste and increase collection and recycling rates at the end of life. Strengthening international policy frameworks, such as through the United Nations Environmental Assembly, the Basel Convention, the International Maritime Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Trade Organization will be particularly important. The discussions around the Global Plastics Treaty at UNEA could include setting an ambitious goal of reaching near zero plastic pollution entering the ocean by 2040 and reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions from plastics throughout their life cycle through a system change approach. And with an ambitious global blinding plastic pollution treaty, we have the potential to reverse and stop plastic pollution from within one generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winnie, for this very clear outline of a roadmap, the 6 tasks we have to tackle, the linkage to other actors such as the Basel Convention, FAO, and others, and also other benefits, co-benefits that can be achieved by an ambitious outcome of the treaty. I think you have also prepared the ground for the next speaker, Nunez. She works as a program officer at Oceans Foundation. And she was a core team member that developed the Plastic Policy Playbook, Strategies for Plastic-Free Ocean. That is a guidebook for policymakers and relevant stakeholders on plastic policy solution. Erika, I assume, will also build up what the previous speaker has said. And as I represent the policymakers, I will listen carefully on your advice, what I have to do in the next weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to make sure you can hear me well. Greetings, everyone. And thank you to the Forum on Trade, Environment, and the SDGs, the Geneva Environment Network, the Geneva Graduate Institute, and others for hosting this very important event. It is an honor to speak with you today, and I am grateful for the opportunity. My name is Erika Nunez. I'm the Program Officer for the Plastics Initiative at the Ocean Foundation, a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. There is an immense amount of expertise on this panel, and I imagine that we all share complementary views of what our vision and goals are for the global framework to end plastic pollution, which will be negotiated over the next few years. We've all heard the saying that when it comes to plastic pollution, there is not one singular solution that will solve this problem. And I believe the mandate that was negotiated at UNEA 5.2 does provide the foundation to tackle the complex issue of plastic pollution. Some elements that I would like to highlight include, first and foremost, the fact that all member states agreed on the need for a legally binding instrument that takes a comprehensive approach to address the full life cycle of plastics, and the recognition that plastic pollution includes microplastics is something worth applauding. In addition, the provision that promotes the development of national action plans that work towards the prevention, reduction, and elimination of plastic pollution are all necessary to ensure the development of a framework that could truly have impact. And I want to also note that the recognition of the significant contribution of workers in the informal and cooperative sectors is a step towards establishing an inclusive framework that we must not lose sight of. But I want to focus the rest of my talk on the provision which calls on this framework to promote the sustainable production and consumption of plastics, including product design. The OECD defines sustainable plastics as plastics used in the products that provide societal benefits while enhancing human and environmental health and safety across the entire product life cycle. We know that currently the development of plastic products does not always take this definition of sustainability into account. More than 10,000 chemicals, including monomers, additives, and processing aids have been identified to be used in the manufacture of plastics, many of which little is known about their impacts. But we do know that about 2,400 of them have been identified as potentially hazardous. Sustainable plastics should limit the creation of waste, toxins, and pollutions from their production to next use or end of life, should have minimal negative impacts on humans and the environment, climate, and promote a more circular economy. We know that about 90% of all plastics is not recycled or cannot be recycled. Only about 21% of plastics are even theoretically recyclable in the most perfect system. Plastics are made to be too complex and often too customized to contribute to a true circular economy. Manufacturers mix polymers, which come in a multitude of formulations, additives, colorants, adhesives, and other materials to make different products and applications. This often means that products are made up of various layers of plastic film that would otherwise turn a recyclable product into unrecyclable single-use pollutants, as these ingredients in layers are not easily separated. Poor product design, the inclusion of problematic materials and additives, the lack of transparency in labeling and material composition, the excessive level of customization, all contribute to the lack of recyclability of most plastic products. So in terms of this discussion and why we're here today, one of my goals is that in the resulting framework to end plastic pollution addresses the design of plastic at the production stage to be simplified, sustainable, and most importantly, safe for humans and the environment. And with my last 30 seconds, I want to emphasize that we hear a lot about a circular economy for plastics, minimum recycled content standards, and other solutions to plastic pollution. But if we don't also start to examine and change the way plastics are made, we will not be able to achieve the necessary metrics for those policies to be effective. That's why a key outcome for me for the Plastics Treaty is substantial measures to address sustainable plastic production and design. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this contribution. I think it was very interesting, because thank you for reminding us that it is true that all member states at UNEA have agreed to this is really a milestone. I think last time that we have agreed to launch negotiations for legally binding agreement was more than 10 years back. That's really an extraordinary moment. I think also what you have highlighted is kind of what is the barriers to recycling, that we don't have enough recycling at this stage. What is the plastic product? How does it look like? What's about additives? That is for sure one of the questions we have further discussed and look into it. I think also Father has mentioned the linkage to other stakeholders like the BRS Convention that meet in a few weeks here in Geneva for their COP. That's for sure a topic we have also take up there. We have also mentioned the informal sector, that also there is a lot of economic realities, a lot of jobs also in this field. And we had foreseen also, it was invited to have somebody who represents the Global Alliance of Waste Pickers this afternoon here, Soledad Melia, but unfortunately she was not able to attend this afternoon. So perhaps there will be another occasion also to hear the voice of those people who are directly, their livelihood is directly also linked or depending on this, on the waste. I would go to the next speaker, that is Ben Dixon. He's a partner at SYSTEMIQ. For those who don't know SYSTEMIQ, it's an organization that provides a lot of basic information about the plastic, a lot of modeling about plastic waste. They did a lot of also inputs to very important reports that is published on this topic. Ben is managing the SYSTEMIQ's growing work program on plastics, aiming to facilitate the critical transition towards a more circular and less wasteful plastic packaging industry. Ben, you have the floor.
Thank you, Felix. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you. It's a great honor to be invited today and to share a panel with so many other wonderful speakers. SYSTEMIQ, so we're a B Corp company. We provide advice to corporations and investors. We carry out analytical research, and we also have frontline action initiatives on this topic. For example, Project Stop, which is a partnership program in Indonesia, where we're helping cities to drive the transition to a circular plastics economy. And this means that our work on this issue takes us into boardrooms, but it also takes us to communities on the front line of this challenge. And we see the real issues here. We see children playing on beaches covered in plastic. We see fishermen, speak to fishermen pulling up net loads of plastic waste. And we talk to local governments struggling with the unaffordable burden of growing volumes of low value plastics and resorting to unmanaged dump sites, littering or toxic open burning of plastic waste. So I'll share a couple of, I guess, cautionary points and then some of our visions here. The two cautionary points I would share is, firstly, we absolutely share the excitement of many people who've spoken today about this unique and historic opportunity for a legally binding global treaty focused on plastic pollution. But the concerns I would share is, firstly, that we cannot let this negotiation process reduce the urgency for action today. We can't afford to lose momentum, and I hope particularly that industry will see the next 2 years is an opportunity to accelerate voluntary action in order to demonstrate the solutions that the treaty negotiators can take up in their policy frameworks. I think the second caution or concern is we try to stuff this treaty negotiation with so many things, such a wish list of priorities, that it ultimately becomes indigestible. And I think that as a multi-stakeholder, multinational community, we have a responsibility to make sure that the perfect does not become the enemy of the good in this process. But onto the vision. So we've done, as Felix said, some work on modeling and analytical research. And as we've then tried to step back from that and look at what priorities emerge or features for the international treaty, we have identified 5 priorities. The first one is that an ambitious global goal for this treaty. The second one is coordinated national and regional plastic pollution action plans that can include national targets aligned with the global goal, national and regional plans that are tailored to those local contexts, and assessments of funding, how much money is required for each of those to actually deliver those plans. The third feature is harmonized monitoring and reporting. I think many speakers have spoken about already. Fourthly, learning and research is embedded into this process because there are many knowledge gaps, and also we need new solutions. We don't have all the solutions on our fingertips today. And the fifth part of this priority list is transition finance and policies to close the financing gaps that we see in the system. So of those 5 priorities, personally, I would just highlight the 5th point about closing financing gaps as a particular priority for the negotiation. What we have seen in our analysis and also in our action initiatives is that many solutions already exist for a circular and zero pollution plastic system, but they are not in the money, and they're competing with a high waste, highly optimized system of fossil fuel derived single-use plastics. In Indonesia, the research carried out for the Indonesian National Plastic Action Partnership indicates that Indonesia alone requires $18 billion in infrastructure financing and additional funding at least $1 billion per year to sustainably operate this infrastructure. And these are the financing gaps that we need to close, and policies such as reuse mandates, extended producer responsibility policies, virgin taxes, or recycle content mandates. All of these kind of policy instruments have the potential to close the gap and to make these circular solutions commercially successful so that they can grow with this tailwind of investment, they can bring jobs, and they can bring local economic benefits. So thank you for the opportunity to contribute today. And I look forward to hearing more from the other speakers. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for the cautious words. It's always good not to only be enthusiastic, but also be realistic. So, and also the call not to slow down, but accelerate actions while we are negotiating the new treaty. It's also interesting what you have mentioned about the financing gap, that we have policy instruments in place that exist, that we have to see how we can expand them, how we can apply them in different contexts to increase the resource available for this important task. We would go to our next speaker. This is Joao Sousa. He is a senior program officer at IUCN. He works in the Global Marine and Polar Program. He's focusing on microplastics, biodiversity action plans, carbon offsetting, and energy. And he works and aims to put an end to man plastic pollution. Joao, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I work at IUCN. IUCN believes that the plastic pollution issue needs to actually be dealt, of course, in a holistic manner. And that closing the plastic tap, which, by the way, it's the name of our program that was initiated 8 years ago, is the first step towards the solution of these problems. As plastic is not one product, but a family of products, we're dealing with a family of problems. It doesn't sound right, but it's just true. So, as to share a bit about the vision on an ideal system that would end plastic pollution. Very briefly, again, a system that is holistic, so all-inclusive. A system that understands that not all plastics are born equal. If you plot usefulness or service provided against externalities of that plastic, you will classify plastics in a way that allows for an accurate management of entire life cycle of plastics. Also, because not all plastics are alike, not all should die the same way. And there's a specific meaning here. Overall, a system that encourages design with purpose, chemical design, I mean, bio-benign design. So when you design it, it's already considering its lifespan and afterlife options. It's the best way, just start to prevent this. Also a system that understands that at national level, for example, and if at national level, if you can't manage, then don't buy it, don't even allow it. I'm talking more specifically about seeds, small and developing states. We've been working a lot across small and developing states. In countries where you lack the capacity to manage end of life for plastics, don't allow them to come in the first place. Or apply the simple rule for suppliers, bring in, bring out. It's the way we do it at our houses. I don't store around my house things that I don't want. So you cannot just pretend that you are not flooding a lot of these type of small and developing states with plastic that there finds no way out after it's used. Another point that was supposed I was asked to comment was key goals and targets. Here, okay, again, in terms of the treaty, standard approach with flexibility to encompass geographical, economical, environmental, and cultural sensitivities. Promotion of R&D and innovation for entire value chain, from polymer design to end-of-life solutions. Partnership creation, consumers, producers, retailers, government, and academia, NGOs. Again, standards and definitions is always good to remember so we can avoid the Babel Tower effect. Meaning that we all need to speak the same language. That's what the treaty is all about. If I ask the simple question like, what is recycling? We need to understand that until some years ago, for some countries, recycling was exporting to low and middle income countries. This was because it's recycling. So we need to go on standards and definitions and set this in stone as much as possible. Key approaches and features for the new international treaty on plastic pollution. Point one, again, all inclusive with all stakeholders, specifically, and I should mention these waste pickers that seem to be so often forgotten or only considered as raw material provider for recyclers, when in fact they provide a service to the environment and should actually be paid for that. Point number two, a treaty that is flexible without being lax. Point number three, to finalize my short presentation, responsible above all towards the environment, because all of us depend on the environment. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I think you have raised different important points. You have also emphasized what others have said also this importance that not to allow to come in the country if you're not able to handle it, or this kind of process where also would be responsible, the one who brings it also again to take it out. I think also once more this makes a linkage to the Basel Convention. When you think about the plastic amendment, I think that's one of the main motivations to deal with plastic waste, because we have heard that different countries have challenging managing plastic waste they are receiving, and to introduce what we call the PIC procedure, the prior informed consent, is one of the tools that we have also to prevent unwanted imports. I think also important point that you made was about how standards regulations can drive innovation, can sustain innovation, and also their support creation of jobs and new opportunities. We will turn to the next speaker, that is Carsten Wachholz. He works for the MacArthur Foundation. I think those who work with plastic, we all know this foundation. They have been a very important actor in pushing this topic forward. Carsten Wachholz and his team focus on strengthening the links between the European and global policy agenda with the foundation's systemic initiatives on plastic, fashion, food. And they also work closely to the linkages with the EU Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0. Carsten, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the kind introduction and the invitation to speak on this panel. I already have the feeling after having listened to all of you before talking for me that we are talking already on the same issues, still in a slightly different way, but the panel is a great start to align and start converging how we talk about the solutions to plastic pollution that then can hopefully be captured in a compelling way for policymakers around the world in the global treaty. Let me quickly share a few slides with you what we think the work the foundation has done to date can contribute to that discussion. So as I also copied the link to our work in the chat if you're interested to read more. In fact, we think we have developed already a common vision and concrete targets, although for 2025, so where the treaty will in the best place just being agreed for a circular economy for plastics, mainly through the new Plastics Economy Global Commitment together with UNEP and the Foundation's Plastic Pact Network. But you need to keep in mind that all our work has been focused on one crucial value chain, the plastic packaging value chain. However, we think that our new plastics economy vision can be broadened to inform the UN treaty discussions. And with these 6 bullet points, I give it a very first rudimentary try how that could look like. So obviously, currently the framing is mostly around preventing plastic pollution, but we think we need to combine the two things, preventing pollution and increasing circularity for plastics and beyond plastics. That entails clearly also the avoidance of problematic and unnecessary plastic materials and items through redesign, innovation, or substitution via other materials and products. Those plastic products and packaging that are put on the market need to be designed and be reused, recycled, or composted in practice. There will still be residual waste that needs to be managed in an environmentally sound manner, but hopefully with a focus of still producing high quality secondary raw materials from it. We have lots of discussions around health, safety, and rights of all the people involved in the value chain that need to be respected, to being taken accounted for in the global framework. And as a result, we hope that overall production and consumption of plastics will be decreasing, decoupled from the use of fossil fuels, and the remaining need for virgin materials inputs are based on regenerative sourced feedstocks. And honestly, that is not only true for plastics. If we're switching partly towards other materials, the same criteria would have to be applied. Zooming a bit out, because we need to simplify and not become the enemy of the best. We say usually that our vision is based on 3 main principles: eliminating all problematic unnecessary plastic items, innovation to ensure that the plastics we do need are reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and circulate all the plastics we use to keep them in the economy and out of the environment. Why do we think this is relevant for the UN Treaty? The presentation from Q made it very clear that the current prospect and projection of what is expected in the next 20 years are not very promising. So we need to make significant progress on all 3 levers. You see the elimination part is probably the biggest one. There's a relevant contribution from circulating plastic materials, but we also have quite a significant amount of plastics in our economic system that we currently don't have a solution to prevent them from leaking into the environment. So a significant amount of innovation is needed to get to zero leakage. How can we translate these into policy objectives, both for governments, but also for businesses? So when you think about elimination and you want to measure the progress around it, we have started setting absolute or virgin plastic reduction targets with our network of businesses who are committed to work towards that common vision. It needs to be underpinned not just by increasing recycling, but also increased efforts on elimination and reuse. We need to have a very well-funded and very targeted research and development agenda, and hopefully the treaty discussions will facilitate a mechanism to get an alignment on what's needed, focusing also on not only on new materials, but also on new delivery models, and focusing on those plastic streams, which we know will, even in a time frame of 20 to 30 years, difficult to be managed or handled. And finally, we need mechanisms to provide stable recurring funding for collection of cycling, where we all know that if industry doesn't pay their fair share through extended producer responsibility schemes or equivalent mechanisms, we will not ramp up the systems and infrastructures needed. What policy priorities should the negotiations on the Global Plastics Treaty take into account? So we tried to capture that again into 3 elements. We heard already a lot about design. We think mandatory design requirements can help us both on the elimination part, because if you don't fulfill certain requirements, you should not put it out on the market. those who are put on the market, including the known plastic alternatives or substitutes, must be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. The downstream part is, as I just pointed out, mostly focusing on systems and infrastructure. But even if we bring those two elements together, if we don't shift regulatory and economic incentives to promote the uptake of circular solutions, new delivery modes, recycled materials, it will not work because the economics are still hardwired towards cheap virgin plastics and the linear system. Just to say that this is not totally detached from what others are talking about it. So the OECD Global Plastic Outlook that has been published, the first part just ahead of UNEA, has defined 3 similar type of policy packages. There's the immediate need to close leakage pathways, which is very closely linked to the questions of systems and infrastructure to collection and disposal. They talk also about incentives, but rather narrowly defined for recycling and sorting, while we are talking about broader economic incentives to shift the system. And then there is the advanced option of restraining demand and design for circularity. So again, I see already that several actors in the field are starting to align how they talk about the need for the policy response to plastic pollution. For us, it's clear in the end, key targets, principles, concepts, standards, terms, metrics, including hopefully legal definition of a circular economy approach for plastics and beyond plastics, will have to be integrated into a global agreement to end plastic pollution. Many thanks and happy to contribute to the discussion going on.
Thank you very much, Carsten, for this very sound presentation. I think there was a very clear point, also linkage to previous speakers. And I liked also this new plastic economy, this kind of model, and the 3 keywords: eliminate, innovate, circulate. I think that we will use also in further speeches. I think that's quite clear and outlines in a very easy way some of the key aspects. I think also our next speaker, Paolo Glerean, he will build up on a lot of what you have said. Paolo has more than 20 years of experience in plastic recycling, and we have heard that design and recycling are key issues when we discuss about the potential, about the treaty that we have to negotiate. So we're much looking forward to hear from Paolo his insights about recycling and what we can do in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you, the organization, for having invited me here. And I guess I could bring maybe the viewpoint of a plastic recycler with 22 years experience, and maybe we should hear some kind of viewpoint from the field. I guess this could be a very important part of the solution. I mean, plastic recycling. And I just would like to point out some key concepts that should be probably better investigated and more deeply investigated. First one is the value that we give to the waste. So we have to find a way on how to give value to the waste, because if we will be able to increase the quality of waste, we will be able, with a proper collection, with a proper sorting, to feed at the best the recycling activity. And recycling, I would say, I will try to make it quite easy. If you have a good quality in, you will have a good quality out, and the other way around, bad quality in, bad quality out. But if you are able to have as an outcome and high quality, then you will have high chances to replace virgin materials, which answers to one of the points, that's how we can reduce the usage of plastics, make it circular. And you can get it circular only if you have a quality in the waste. Then the key point is how can we improve the quality of the waste? And here is where design for recycling can play a big role. And of course, with some legal requirement, of course, but also in terms of incentives to the companies which are investing in design for recycling. In this extent, the concept of a modulation of green dot fees, where you have an extended producer responsibility scheme, can play a key role as a tool, which leads me to the second concept, which is APR. APR systems has been proven to tackle, I would say, the issue in its largest part, as we can see here in Europe. Of course, worldwide, we don't have APRs in several countries, and probably we need a kind of differentiation. So for the most advanced countries like Europe, for instance, we will need probably a new generations of APR, much more focused to the circularity, while in the rest of the world, where we do not have extended producer responsibility schemes, probably we have to start with the experience of the existing APRs in order to start a real economy on plastic waste. So how to collect plastic waste, how to sort plastic waste, and how to recycle it. By the way, I guess a large part of the 18 billion euros of investment that has been mentioned before, and the 1 billion euro per year as expenses, I hope this can go to a large part of society, or people that can get some real benefit in terms of salary out of these activities. And of course, you will have a double benefit, of course, diminishing dramatically the quantity of leakage of plastic in the environment, at the same time to provide, I would say, some consistent salary to poor people. And this can come out of the APR. So this concept must be enlarged to the countries where it is not in place at the moment. Then in Europe here, we have probably to have a second generation of APRs. Last key concept I would like to bring to you is when we think about how to do different, I mean material substitution or even new technologies, we have to have always in mind that the target shouldn't be how to eliminate plastics. The target should be resource efficiency first, and also, I would say probably on top of resource efficiency, climate change. So when we take some choices, we have always to have in mind these two concepts. Otherwise, we will just look at a very, I would say, detail, if I may say this word, and we will lose the overall picture of the climate change, which is the key challenge, in my opinion. This is it from my end.
Thank you very much. This is highly appreciated. And I think we have also heard before how important it is to have an inclusive process, so to bring different experiences, realities. So I think, as you have mentioned, it's very important to have also people with concrete experiences, for example, in recycling, to be part of the discussion, to take into account this reality. I think also what you have mentioned about EPRs will be an important discussion. I think also we have to learn more about how they are applied in different countries, in different contexts. What can we do on a global level to support them? And what should we do perhaps on a national or regional level? The last speaker on my list is David Azoulay. He is the managing attorney at the Center for International Environmental Law, CIEL, and he co-leads CIEL's plastic work. He's an active observer and participant in all the negotiations in this field, and we will for sure hear from him some insights out the legal perspective and also views from the civil society.
Thank you very much, Felix, for the introduction. Thank you very much, Caroline, for the very kind invitation and for putting up such an interesting event. The questions that were put to the last panel are quite extensive and ambitious. We're talking ambitious, and those of you who know me know that sticking to 5 minutes is going to be challenging. But I'll try to summarize the point that I wanted to make and also include a few maybe unpopular or challenging opinions about this, because this is usually why I'm invited in some of those things. So one of the first questions was about what sorts of goals should we set to ourselves. And the first one is we need to set ourselves a clear objective. And in that respect, we also need to look at what has been adopted UNEA. And this is not a treaty to end plastic use. This is not a treaty to address the question of plastic waste. This is not a treaty to address plastic leakage. This is an international instrument to end plastic pollution. And it's important for us to stick to that ultimate goal and not try to constantly redefine the goal and minimizing it. So you may ask, yes, but plastic pollution is a pretty large and wide term. How should we define this? Well, I have a good news for you. The OECD has been working on this for quite some time, and they've adopted a definition that I think is quite appropriate for the work that we've set ourselves to. It's plastic pollution is all emissions and risks resulting from plastic production, use, waste, management, and leakage. So that is the goal that we need to set for ourselves and we need to try to achieve. And in that respect, I was a little concerned to hear quite a number of speakers really focus on what is the best way to address plastic waste. Again, what was adopted was not a treaty to address plastic waste. It's one to end plastic pollution. And in that respect, we've also heard quite a bit about the value and importance of circular economy approaches, and I couldn't agree more. But it is also important for us to clarify what we mean by circular economy. Too often, circular economy is limited to the idea of resource efficiency, bringing back material into the economic cycle. This leaves behind, and this kind of forgets, what were the original intent and definition of circular economy. There is indeed this question of minimizing resources use, but there is also the number one aspect of circular economy is eliminating, all externalities. And among the externalities that I have almost not heard mentioned today are externalities about health. We've heard a number of people talking about that number of substances used in plastic that are toxics or that are known to be toxics, but this question hasn't yet been fully considered. And I think in order for us to achieve the objective that we've set for ourselves, in order to address the questions of emissions, of pollution, in order to address the questions of fence line communities that were mentioned a number of times, of worker safety and others, it is really critical that we bring back this particular objective and consideration of the health externalities around plastic. Another key element that will be critical for the success of our work is the question of financing. It was mentioned a number of times. Of course, this treaty will come at a financial cost, but it's important to realize that not to focus on the financial cost. Too often, we focus on the financial cost and then end up doing a cost-benefit analysis and wonder, well, maybe this is too expensive to do. It is very important to remember that the status quo currently has massive costs as well. Not adopting proper policies and provisions will have a massive cost. And so it's important to put that into perspective. But still, it will require financing, actual money to help implement the issues. In that respect, it was very helpful to see the UNIA discussion come to terms with the idea that we will probably need a dedicated fund to that to implement this. But it's important to also look at where will the money come from that will bond and feed this fund? Traditionally, all of those funds are bonded to by government money, external aid, development aid, and others. And some of you may remember that 30 years ago, the global community came together and adopted a number of principles that should guide international actions. And among those principles is the polluter pays principle. And so if we want this process to be successful, we have to ensure that it is provided with sufficient fund, and we have to ensure that those who have financially benefited from the production of plastic over the past 50 years pay the true costs of remediation and supporting solutions that we now have to put in place. Another thing that I've heard a lot today that I think is critical is about science-based. We want science-based pollution. And it was very exciting and very interesting to hear also the Swiss proposing ways at UNIA to support science-based policy and to support how to best use science. It is important in that respect to recognize that science can be used in many ways. And the way science works, by asking new questions and by digging and exploring for new knowledge, can be weaponized to uphold the status quo and to prevent change or to prevent ambitions to be realized or to prevent regulations to be adopted. So let's go back to that question. We want science-based. Well, we've had a number of very top-notch scientific institutions that have looked into what needs to be done in that respect to be achieved. And I'm not talking about uncertainty about what is the exact shape, color, composition of the microplastic that will have the exact impact on that particular organ or others, but really take a step back and look at all the very deep research scientific work that has been done to identify what needs to be done. And the second speaker from this panel, Winnie, told us about exactly this. They have done extensive research. And if we're serious about doing science-based policy, then this is what we should go to. They've identified science has identified the 6 major elements that we should work on. And among the first one is reducing virgin plastic production. So I am, again, very supportive of science as long as it is not twisted, weaponized, or turned against the solution and ambition that we have set for ourselves. Another element, and I'm almost done, another element that is very important that was mentioned by the Peru ambassador is the question of rights-based approach. By adopting a rights-based approach is a way to ensure not only that it's a win-win situation, but ensure a just transition, ensure that the communities that are impacted, mostly impacted, will be, their issues will be addressed. And that is something that can serve as a guidepost. So the concluding point, I would like to say that we cannot afford to lose momentum. It took us 5 years and a half to get to this point. We have 2.5 years now to negotiate something. And we cannot limit our ambition to what we currently understand can be achieved now without upsetting the status quo. We need to keep our eyes and focus on the overarching objective, to end plastic pollution. Yes, it is ambitious, but I strongly invite and encourage you to not believe the people who will tell you that it is impossible and that we need to be realistic. This form of realism is really just a way to uphold the current status quo. And it is that form of realism that has put us in the current situation that we're in, and that requires the kind of ambition and global actions that we've set ourselves to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for those points. I think we have also can take different points from you. We have heard importance not only to link trade and environment, but also environment and health. So to work on this field also. We have also, what has already mentioned, the kind of how can we raise the funds, how can we mobilize resources. We have introduced also the polluter pays principle as one of the sources, and also warned a bit that science policy is very important, but it has also to be used in a sound and good way that it can accelerate and improve actions and not be a barrier. Caroline was very clear when she made the outline for this meeting that we have to keep time. The panelists for this one have kept the time. So I think I have 2 more minutes to ask a question.
Yes.
And I have to turn to our first speakers, Ambassador Velasquez, because he had not the chance to react to other speakers. So Ambassador, I would like just to ask you, you have heard the different interventions now, and I was wondering, what are the key elements you take with? Perhaps one point that impressed you, or that has surprised you, or one of the messages that you will have heard that is really something that you think is very important. And to be really fair and have a level playing field, I would also give the same chance to Ambassador Luis Vallas, if he's still on, that they could also respond to the same question on this panel. What is the key takeaway from what you have heard in this last round? Ambassador Velasquez, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this panel, these interventions. I think this reaffirms the fact that the process should be inclusive, transparent, and participatory, as we mentioned, to include all these views from civil society, the scientific community, academia, practitioners on the field, which are the ones that participated today. And I thank very much the idea that this process and this treaty needs to be ambitious is fully shared. Also, I heard that we need to be realistic. It's always like that in any negotiation, and that is the idea. But what we also think is that this problem is so comprehensive, so broad, that we need to include several points of view. And I think that the fact that we mentioned that human rights approach is very important, because there are special communities that are very much affected by this problem. Some countries are more affected than others, particularly regarding the damage that has already been done to the environment, the oceans, and I think we need to tackle this specific problem. Now, looking to the future, but also considering that the past is already important and we need to solve what has already happened. I think that also it was very important is that, as everybody mentioned, that we consider the whole cycle of the problem, from the production, design, consumption, and also managing waste, which is a very big problem for all our countries, particularly the poorest ones. Also, I think financing was very much stressed, and I think that's the reason we stress the need of means of implementation. And I think that we need to be creative, and we need to consider the facts that were mentioned about who were the countries that were more involved in the production and the benefits of this. But I think this is a problem in every negotiation, and we need to be creative, and we need to hear every point of view. This is basically my takeaway from this briefly in the point of view for all the interventions I heard today. Thank you very much for your invitation and the work you are doing.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those for your takeaways from this session. I will now give the floor to Ambassador Luis Vallas for his takeaways. And as mentioned before, Caroline is reminding me of the essence of time. So thank you for also keeping it short and concise.
Well, thank you very much, dear Felix. It's really nice to see you again after our environmental negotiations there in Geneva. Let me thank you for the excellent conduction of this session too. And my gratitude also to all the panelists for the insightful and important interventions today. We have listened to international organizations, governments, NGOs, private sector, and multiple stakeholders. The discussion has provided us with a vision of a treaty that can be ambitious, recognizing the scale and scope of the challenge at hand, which needs to galvanize the engagement and actions from the wide range of actors. Many have mentioned that the treaty provides opportunities to address the impacts on public health and the environmental and drive innovation and new opportunities for sustainable trade. We need to harness the extraordinary energy and expertise from so many stakeholders to tackle plastic pollution across the whole life cycle, noting that we will need expertise from actors we have listened to today on multiple issues. A collaborative multilateral approach and engaged coordination among instruments and processes mean to sum up and work together from every organization's expertise to contribute to our shared vision, which is already happening across the UN system and other organizations. We can make, and we do make, national efforts to combat plastic pollution. In my country, Ecuador, we have implemented legislation on this matter, and we have been quite active in different forums at UN, WTO, and other organizations toward the adoption of this legally binding international instrument. You know, we have the Galapagos Islands, and we have a special legislation for the Galapagos, where plastic has affected our fauna and flora. And as you know, this year, we have enlarged the marine reserve in the islands. But national efforts are not enough. Governments must work together, bringing on board all the actors that have something to say and contribute to the treaty. This is a task for the whole international community. Ecuador and I will be honored to continue contributing with my expertise on multilateral environmental negotiations and hopefully leading the negotiation process on behalf of the international community. We need what I call the 5 C's: coordination, collaboration, cooperation, concessions, and of course, compromises. Thank you once again for this wonderful, a very productive dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those closing remarks from your side. And I would just like to thank all the panelists for their contributions for this very interesting and sound exchange. And I give back to you, Caroline.
Wonderful. Thank you, Felix, and for being super Swiss and getting us almost exactly on time to finish. Thank you all for what has been really a marathon exercise to listen to all of this. Hopefully you found it as enriching as we have. I'd like to, on behalf of all of the organizers, really thank all of our panelists and all of you. And I think there are over 250 people who've joined us online over the afternoon. So that's really an excellent sign, I think, of the interest and engagement and excitement about this topic. I want to really acknowledge my colleagues from the Geneva Trade Platform here at the Graduate Institute for their work in making this event possible. I also just wanted to remind you all that there is a reception upstairs in the Graduate Institute cafeteria, which is starting pretty much now. So please do stay. One of our goals here was to also try and galvanize a sense of energy among the community of experts and stakeholders working on this. So please do join us upstairs. And I don't think I will try to summarize in any substantive way, except to say our goal today was to take stock of the state of play, to start galvanizing a sense of where we're going next, to bring together some of the key players and thinkers on this. And I think we've achieved all of those goals. I guess the next step is to really focus. It's quite overwhelming, I would say, listening to the range of activities and initiatives, things that need to happen. I guess for the treaty, it struck me at the end, we need to focus more on where are we most facing challenges of international cooperation, and where can that international cooperation best help, and how can stakeholders most help us and push us to make sure that governments do what they need to do to set the right framework for this. So thank you all so much for your time, and it'll be closed with that. Thank you.